Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So we are reading from chapter 10, chapter 4th, verse number 10 from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Vitaraga bhaya krodha manmaya mam upashritaha bahavo jnana tapasa puta mad bhavam agataha. वीतराग भय क्रोधा मन्मया मामुपाश्रिताः बहवो ज्ञान तपसा पूतमद भावम आगताः वीतराग भय क्रोधा मन्मया मापुपाश्रिताः बहवो ज्ञान तपसा पूतमद भावम आगताः. Vita, freed from, raga, attachment, fear, bhaya, fear, krodha, and anger, matmaya, full in me, mam, in me, upashritaha, being fully situated, bhavataha, many, bhavaha, many, gyan of knowledge, tapasa, by the penance, putaha, being purified, matta bhavam, transcendental love for me, agataha, attained. Translation by Srila Prabhupada and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me, and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Purport. As described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the Supreme Absolute Truth. Generally, people who are attached to the body conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand how the Supreme can be a person. Such materialists cannot even imagine that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep this same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of the gigantic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the supreme to be impersonal, and because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them. When they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal, they become afraid of becoming persons again. And so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal void. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean, which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence attainable without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all, being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation. They become disgusted or even angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately void. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause, and some of them disbelieve in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. This last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their effective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. One has to get rid of all three stages of material consciousness: attachment to the material life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. So I'll read this line again. One has to get rid of three stages of material consciousness: attachment to the material life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. To get free from these three stages of the material concept of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. The last stage of the devotional life is called bhava, or transcendental love of Godhead. According to Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu 1.4.15 to 16, the science of devotional service, आदौ श्रद्धा तथा साधु संगोत्थ भजन क्रिया ततो अनर्थ निवृत्ति स्यात् ततो निष्ठ रुचिस्ततः अथासक्तिस्ततो भावस् अथासक्तिस्ततो भावस् ततः प्रेमा भूय दंचति साधकानाम् अयं प्रेमणः प्रादुर्भावे भवेत् क्रमः अथात अथासक्तिस्ततो भावस्ततः प्रेमा भयुदानति साधकानाम् अयं प्रेमणः प्रादुर्भवे भवेत् क्रमः. In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness in self realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So, by the slow process of devotional service under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one individual spiritual personality, and from the frustrations that result in void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain to the abode of the Supreme Lord. ॐ अज्ञानं तिमिरिन्दस्य ज्ञानञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम् वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं श्रीकृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. I'll recite the verse once more. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse number 10. Vitaraga bhaya krodha manmaya mamupashitaha behavo jnana tapasa bhuta madabhava magataha. Being free from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. So, uh, the conversation between Krishna and Arjun is going on from the previous chapter to this chapter, and here Krishna is going to explain various aspects of his own personality, but he's taking references of this world first, how the living entities are living their lives in this world, and how then, by knowing and understanding about him, they can reach out to him. And the purport by Srila Prabhupada, as we can see, is pretty long and lengthy, wherein Srila Prabhupada has taken efforts to give the entire process of devotional service. And he has also given an understanding when Krishna is saying here fear, attachment, anger, what exactly it means. And I'm quite actually um, uh, I'm marveling the intelligence of Srila Prabhupada and the previous acharyas, that how are they able to translate um, the meanings of what Krishna really want to say. If you just want to read this words, attachment, fear, and anger, they look like three words which perhaps we cannot reach more than the meaning of what these words would mean in dictionary. Whereas Srila Prabhupada has given very beautiful understanding of these three words. He's saying that attachment, being freed from all material attachments, and fearfulness, he is describing what is this fear. This fear is about losing your own identity, which is this bodily identity, but into losing into what? Into a spiritual identity. And it's quite surprising because we are all devotees of the Lord, and we understand that Krishna has a form, and we understand that we have a form. And when these two forms come together, the relationship between these two forms is that one is the supreme form and other one is the sub servient to this supreme form. And that's the relationship between these two forms. Hence, the engagement with the Lord is that of a service, and that engagement in itself is an spiritual activity or devotional life. And that is a perfection of all perfections, because that is where we exist as our constitutional position. Now, if we understand this conceptually, then we don't have any difficulty. But Srila Prabhupada is pointing out that there are people who are in this material conception of life who cannot think more than the fact that a form which has been given to us by this material nature will be destroyed. Hence, a form cannot be carried forward as a spiritual identity. And they're quite fearful of the fact that when we become spiritualized or realized souls, then we will still have our forms. And that is a misconception that they are still able to carry forward with them. And that misconception, Srila Prabhupada is destroying that misconception by saying that that is the fear. Hmm? That is the fear that people are carrying in their mind, that, oh, there'll be another form and I'll be a form and I'll be subservient to the form. Whereas I want to be the God. I want to be the ultimate. I want to be the controller, the proprietor, and therefore they become impersonalist. Their conception of God is that they will go and merge into these Brahman Jyoti. And when they merge in the Brahman Jyoti, they feel that they'll achieve perfection. And similarly, Srila Prabhupada is also calling out that those people, there are people who become frustrated. Uh, bhi, uh, Rag, Bhaya, Krodha. Now here, Krodh, generally we would translate Krodh that, okay, it's material anger coming from Rajogun, not being satisfied in the mode of passion, you will ultimately become angry and frustrated. Now here, there's another Krodh that is there. That Krodh is that even though I'm trying my best, and there's nothing that I can achieve here, and, there's this anger within the living entity, and he's saying that there must not exist anything. There must be a void somewhere. So frustrated. They are trying their best and hard. And when they realize that there's only pain and misery that they are going to get, and there's nothing more than they can get from the material world, ultimately, there must be a place where I will have peace of mind. I will have this no body conception. There must be nothing at least. There must be nothing where I can go and be in that nothing. Being nothing, I'll go into that nothing and just be nothing. To this conception of being nothing, nothing, void philosophy. Eh? That's amazing how Srila Prabhupada has transferred these three words to three philosophical concepts that exist in the world. Isn't that amazing? Bhaya, Krodh, Rag, attachment to the world. The people who are very, very attached to this material world, they are not able to take up to the spiritual life. They're not able to take up to the spiritual life. And Krishna is saying that being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me. And thus, they all attained transcendental love for me. So, Krishna is saying that in the previous verse that we read, Krishna said, Janma karma cha me divyam yo veti tattataha taktadeha punarjanma na eti mameti. So Arjuna. So this verse which is on the screen, 4.9, Krishna is just the previous verse. How Krishna is progressing his conversation, so intelligent. Krishna is giving a background first. One who knows about my transcendental nature, of my appearance and activities, does not, upon leaving the body, take birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode. O Arjun. Eh? Why? Why Krishna is giving this background? Because he's just going to speak about people who are not even willing to believe in the personal form of the God. So he's giving this particular verse that my janma, my birth is not an ordinary birth like a birth of somebody else. Why did Krishna speak here like this? Because in previous verses, Krishna told Arjun that I have spoken this knowledge millions of years ago to sun god, and Arjun posed a question that how is that possible, Krishna? I just know you from this life, and I don't know anything beyond this life. And how do you know that? And then Krishna says that your body is changing, Arjun. You are a living entity, and your living entity comes under the under the capture of material energy, and you are encased into this body of earth, fire, water, air, and ether. And when you change this body, you forget everything. You forget everything. And I don't, because I don't change the bodies. My body is Sat, Chit, and Anand. It's not made of material elements at all. So I remain the same body. And I remember everything that I've spoken to. And then Krishna is giving further clues now. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, takes birth again in this material world. And that's very amazing to know that, because then we know that this is the secret formula that Krishna is giving us, that how you can become perfect, become absolutely perfect in devotional life. And so we understand from a lot of Srila Prabhupada's lectures. I was referring to one lecture he has given on Adi Leela 7.11317. You'll find in Veda base how Srila Prabhupada is establishing Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Parasya Shaktir Bhavadeva Shuyate Natasya Karyam Karanam Cha Vidiyate Natat Samas Cha Bhayadhikas Cha Dishyate. That Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is nobody equal or higher than him in opulences. Natasya Samaha. Samaha means equal, and Adhikasya means higher. He has no equal or higher. And that's why he's Supreme Lord. And therefore, everybody is subordinate to him. That is a natural constitutional position. Mayavadi, impersonalists, they feel that they will become God, they'll become equal. But Krishna is saying that there is nobody equal to him. Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam. So, lotus feet of the Supreme Lord are the objectives of all the demigods. These lotus feet of the Lord are as enlightening as the sun in the sky. And Srila Prabhupada has quoted Rig Veda 1.22.20. It's saying, Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Pashyanti Suryaha. Vishnu is the highest Supreme Personality of Godhead in this material world, which is beyond the three modes of material nature. And similarly, everything material has got a fixed date of his birth and his duration and his death or dissolution. But Vishnu hasn't got that kind of situation. Vishnu Tat Paramam Padam, he's the supreme personality of Godhead. He does not annihilate, he does not take birth. Janma Karma Chame Divyam. That's why it's Divya. And uh, there are two kinds of people, Sura and Asura, demons as well as the demigods. Surya Tad Vishnu Paramam Pada Sada Pashyanti. Those who are demigods, those who are godly, they are simply searching after this supreme absolute truth. And then they are worshipping the supreme absolute truth. So, therefore, it should be understood that uh, Krishna, Krishna is the source of everything. In Brahma Samhita, it is mentioned Anjani yes saklendra vittimanti pashyanti panti kalyanti chirama jaganti. We sing these prayers every morning. Anjani yasya shaklendriya vittimanti pashyanti panti kalyanti chiram jaganti. So what does it say? I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limb of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and maintains the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. So here you can see how it is described that Krishna, he can do all the activities from all the senses because his body and his senses are not separable, they are not different. He can he can uh, he can um, he can see from his eyes, from his ears, and he can hear from his eyes. It's one and the same thing for him. But if we close our eyes, we can't see anything. If we close our ears, we can't hear anything. But this is not Krishna. Krishna can do anything of any part of his body. He's so powerful. And therefore, Krishna is also present in every element of the material energy. And therefore, Krishna is also present in his deities, present in his photographs. Whereas if we are separate from our photographs, if somebody is worshiping our photographs, we won't even know about it. But if Krishna's deities are worshipped, is Krishna himself present in that element, which is looking material to us, but it's spiritual element. So, Janma karma chame divyam yo janati tattvata. So important to learn these finer nuances, the spiritual nuances of Krishna's body, Krishna's activities. Then, if we are in that know-how, then Krishna is saying that it is sure that you will not take birth again in this material world. You will come back to me, and that is for sure. And how do we get there? And there's a beautiful verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada often quoted from Canto 3, Chapter 25 and text number 25. He says, Satam prasangam mama virya samvido bhavanti hit karna rasayanah kathaha tad joshanad ash apavarga vartamani shraddharatir bhaktir anukramishyati. In the association of pure devotees, Sata prasanganam, you are discussing this prasang, pastimes of the Lord, virya samvidaha, wonderful activities, and how samvad by samvida. Samvid means samvad, discussions. In association of pure devotees, discussions of the pastimes and activities of Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. Hrit Karna. Hrit, Hriday, and Karna is ear. It's Bhavanti. It's very, very nice. It becomes very pleasing. Rasayana is pleasing. So it becomes very pleasing to the ear and the heart. Hrit Karna Rasayana Katha. Pastimes of the Lord. So, by cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and therefore he is freed and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion arises, when real devotion and devotional service begins. And Srila Prabhupada very elaborately explained how devotional service begins. By the first thing of devotional service is that you come in the association of devotees, and then you perform some devotional services. And when you perform some devotional services, then you get rid of these anarthas in your heart. And then your faith becomes fixed. And it becomes so very fixed, it becomes staunch faith. And once this faith further grows and grows, it comes in the stage of bhava. And from there arises the fruits of bhava, of prema bhakti, which is the love of God and Himself. And similarly, we can understand now in this particular verse, there's also one beautiful line. It says, Taj Joshanad Ash Apavarga, Apavarga Vartamani. Apavarga is defined as the path of liberation. Vartamani is path, Vartamani. And Apavarga. So this word, Apavarga, is very, very interesting because Srila Prabhupada has spoken about Pavarga. Apavarg means one which is not Pavarg. So let's see what is Pavarg. And most of you who have listened to Prabhupada's lectures would have known that Srila Prabhupada describes that there are 5 vargas in Sanskrit. There's a Kavarg. Varg means group of alphabets. So Kavarg, Chavarg, Tavarg, Pavarg, and Thavarg. So Pavarg is very, very specifically described because here the word used apavarga, apavarga. So in this, Srila Prabhupada has explained that pavarg is the 5 alphabets are there in pavarga. And what are these alphabets? Pa, fa, bha, ba, and ma. Pa, fa, ba, bha, ma. This is apavarga. So this is pavarga. Pa, fa, ba, bha, ma. And Prabhupada explains pa means parabhava, means defeat. Living entity is completely defeated in all his endeavors while trying and struggling to become happy in this material world. And that is called as parabhava. You means that is defeated. Then second word is fa. Fa, Prabhupada is described as foam. When a horse is working very, 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 very hard, you will see foam coming out of his mouth. And that foam is called as fena, fena. Sometimes even us living beings, when human beings, when we are working hard, our, our, uh, our throat gets very dry and we need some water. That means working hard is producing some kind of this fur, which is fena or foam in our mouth. And so our mouth becomes dry. And which is why are we working very hard? Because living entity wants to achieve sense gratification. But what happens? He gets defeated. So he gets defeated, which means he prabhava. So from fa means fena. And then ba means bondage with this material world. Because your bondage with the body is so high, then anything related to the body is also material, and hence the bondage with that material also becomes very high. Therefore, living entity is constantly identifying himself with his own body and anything that is related to the body, creating this complete bondage. And in that situation, he's struggling hard and getting defeated every time. So that's ba. But then there's a word bha. Bha means bhaya. Bhaya means fearfulness. Hmm? This fearfulness is again coming in this particular uh, context. So this fearfulness of everything, fearfulness, the biggest fearfulness, or we can say that all the fear that exists in this material world is subservient of one biggest fear, and that biggest fear is the fear of death. Nobody wants to die. Nobody wants to die. So bha means fearfulness, and the next word, which is ma, is mrityu. So fearfulness, and this fearfulness is also coming from the death. Otherwise, fearfulness of everything that exists, and finally, death is there. So this is called pavarga. Now, this particular verse, which we see here, which we spoke about in Bhagavatam. I'll share my screen on this. It's quite a nice verse. Okay, I'm able to do that. Sorry, I'm unable to share the screen right now. Okay, so we'll just carry on. So this fearfulness condition or situation, which was touched upon by this pavarga, um, which is denied in this, which is mentioned in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam 3:25-25. Taj Joshanad Ash Apavarga Vartamani. Apavarg means liberation, because pavarg is bondage or material attachments and fears and hard work for sense gratification and ultimately death. But apavarg means you are getting liberated from all of this. So apavarga vartamani, that means that you'll be put on the path of liberation. You'll become advanced by cultivating knowledge with the association of pure devotees. Satam prasanganam, satam prasangam, mama veera samvido, bhavanti hit karna rasayanah katha, which the katha which will be very, very pleasing to the heart and to the ears. By oral reception of such katha, one would be put on the path of liberation. Apavarga vartamani. Shraddha Ratir Bhaktir Anukramishyati. Anukramishyati is will follow in order, which means gradually. It's not something that will happen now and then. Of course, Krishna has said, Ye yatham mam prapadantis tam tatha bhajami aham. If you surrender now completely, then Krishna will also accept us completely. But our surrender is not happening immediately. It happens gradually, because our faith gradually develops by the association. And with that association, our faith, Shraddha, increases. And then Ratir's attraction towards Krishna increases. And then Bhaktir, devotion increases. So Shraddha, Ratir, Bhaktir, Anukramishyati. Gradually, this process will take us to the understanding of who Krishna is and what is the nature of Krishna. And then we can realize that the very words that Krishna is talking here today, Beat Raga Bhaya Krodha, Manmaya Mamupashitaha, attachment, fear, and anger. One would one would be able to get rid of all of this by being fully absorbed in me. And that absorption will happen by the process of oral reception, by a process of association of devotees, by process of uh, hearing about Krishna, which is going to be very pleasing to our ears and to our heart. And Krishna is now saying that I'm not just lying to you, Arjun. He's saying, Bhava Jnana Tapasa Puta Mad Bhavam Agataha. He's saying that many bhavaha, many have in the past have been purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attend transcendental love for me. This is how Krishna is explained. So it's 8:40. Uh, I'll speak for another 5 minutes. This is Kartik month going on, and we are singing the glories of Lord Damodar. And if I just want to touch upon the verse 7 of Damodar Ashtakam, in which there's a description of the two sons of Kove who ultimately becomes the Yamal trees. And why did they become Arjun trees, Yamal Arjun trees? Manigriv and Nalkovera. So why did they become um, Arjun trees?
Ji,
Because Hare Krishna.
sorry, Prabhuji, carry on. Hare Krishna.
Okay. So when Narad Muni was traveling in the Gandharva Loka, he found that these two boys of Kuwait, they have attained a very, very high position by the association of Lord Shiva, and they have been giving all the opulence of the material world. When they got so much of opulence, their minds got contaminated by the possession of so much of power and wealth, and they were completely intoxicated. So they would spend most of their time in the sense gratification activities. So one time when Ranad Muni reached on this planet and he was passing by, he saw these two boys completely naked without wearing any garments into a pond. And this pond, they were also being accompanied by a lot of other naked, beautiful girls. And there was a beautiful flowers, lotus flowers garden sort of in the pond. So when these girls happened to see Narad Muni, they covered, they covered themselves because they were ashamed of the presence of such a exalted sage before them. Whereas these two boys, Nal Kuver and Manigriv, they were totally intoxicated. They were intoxicated by Varuni, a sort of um, equivalent of alcohols of this world. So they were drunk and they couldn't identify that such an exalted devotee of the Lord is before them, and therefore they were arrogant and they were impudent. So when Narad Muni saw this, he felt very pity. On one hand, he was very angry about the situation, that how they were contaminated by the material energy. On the other hand, he was feeling that these boys of Nal and these boys, both of them are completely lost. Their consciousness is dull and in mode of ignorance. Uh, so, out of compassion, he he cursed them. Now, somebody could say that how a compassion is resulting into a curse, because this curse will become the reason of their liberation. And that's how the curses of great saintly personalities are. Just like the curse to Parikshit Maharaj was also a beautiful happening, because of which then we could hear the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, and within 7 days, Parikshit Maharaj could also go back to Godhead. And it was such a fast, perhaps the fastest transformation that can happen. So some of these curses now are absolutely beneficial in the long run. And when this Nalkuver and Manigri were cursed, they were cursed that because you're living life like a dull consciousness, the most dull consciousness is that of a tree, Duipad Pashu, hmm, of a tree, which the trees are described as one who eat and drink from their feet, not Dvipat Pashu. That's for uh, people who are not following Vedic rituals at all or religion at all. But these trees, they drink and eat from their feet, and they stand at one place for years and years and years. So they were cursed to be equivalent to 100 celestial years on the planet Earth. And however, the curse was followed by a blessing. And the blessing was that these two trees will be situated in the courtyard of Mother Nanda and Yashoda, where Lord Krishna will appear. And they will be able to therefore witness all the Divya pastimes, Janma Karma Chame Divyam, all the divine activities of the Lord, standing there and witnessing each and every activity of the Lord from morning to night and days and weeks and years, uh, all together for so many years. When Krishna's Damodar Leela happened, that happened in Goloka, in Gokul, gaon. So Krishna stayed in Gokul. Nand Baba stayed in Gokul for 3.5 years, and then he moved to Vrindavan near Chatikara for 3.5 years. And this Leela happened in Gokul. And so Krishna's 3.5 year old, perhaps between 3 and 3.5 year old. And these Arjun trees, they could see all the pastimes of Krishna for those many years, and they were so purified. And at the end, because time is less, I'm not going to dwell around in details. I just want to put forward this evidence that when Krishna felt so pity upon them, and he was bound by Mother Yashoda to the grinding mortar, he pushed his grinding mortar and stuck that mortar between the two trees and plucked them out of the earth. And when the trees were broken, these two beautiful personalities came out in their divine bodies with beautiful lotus-like faces and wearing nice, helmets and garlands. And they were both praying to the Lord, and beautiful prayers were offered by these Arjun trees to the Lord. And in these prayers, they were glorifying the Lord and telling and saying to the Lord that you are the supreme personality of the Godhead. And by your mercy, that we are now completely liberated, and by the mercy of our spiritual master, that we are completely liberated now. And then they said very similar thing that Krishna is saying in text 38 of Canto 10, chapter 10. You will hear this. They are saying, may all our words describe your pastimes. May our ears engage in oral reception of your glories. May our hands, legs, and other senses engage in actions pleasing to you. And may our minds always think of your lotus feet. May our head offer our obeisances to everything within this world, because all things are also your different forms. And may our eyes see the forms of Vaishnavas who are non-different from you. So this is the pure desire. This pure desire arises from the heart of these trees, or the sons of Kuvera, only by seeing these transcendental pastimes of Krishna. And therefore, just understanding Krishna's beautiful pastimes, his birth, his death, his appearance and his disappearance, his transcendental activities which he has performed on this planet for our pleasure, for our purity, for our purification, then we should be able to perfect our spiritual lives in that process. So I'll close my talk here. If there are any questions or comments, please feel free.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, my Dandavat pranams to you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the wonderful class. I just wanted to understand that Nal Kuvera and Manigriva, they were they in the spiritual world? Then how can material energy get there and
No,
they can
they
be?
were, Mataji, not in the spiritual world. They were on the planet of Kuver. Kuver's planet is very much part of the material world. When
Okay.
Pandavas in their Agyatavas, that time Arjuna and other Pandavas, they traveled from Himalayas, and there was an alleyway. And from that alleyway, because they were all spiritual beings, the Pandavas, they were all sons of demigods anyway. And those days they could travel from one planet to other, and they were very qualified. From that alleyway, they could reach to the Kuver planet. It is described in Mahabharata that how easily they could just go from Himalayan mountains into the Kuver planets through this alleyway. And from that Kuver planets, then Arjun was boarded into the flight, so to say, or a plane to go to Indraloka to get his training done for the spiritual weapons, as well as to get his this curse that he would have to become a eunuch and learn this beautiful art of dancing in Indraloka. So Kuver is part of the Kuver planet, is part of the material world. He's god of wealth, really, just like Indralok, Chandralok, Suryalok. So is Kuver Lok.
Okay, Prabhuji, thank you very much. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, can I ask one small question?
Yes, Mataji.
Prabhuji, Just wanted to know who was the first, whether it is mortal or any transcendental being, who lighted the first ghee lamp to Krishna, to Damodar or Krishna, or in the whole universe. So where did we get the first light or first lamp?
So, Mataji, our understanding is that Lord Brahma is the very first created being. He is the conditioned soul who is given this privilege of worshipping Lord Krishna. Because when he took birth from Mahavishnu's umbilical cord flowing upwards like a lotus flower and like a lotus. And that's where he took birth. And that's where he started to find the meaning to his life. And then he got this reverberation, uh, echoing sound, reverberating from the ocean, tapaha, and he started performing austerities. And then he was enlightened within, and then spoke this four Vedas. That's where he is glorifying Lord. Now, that's the transcendental pastime um, of Krishna thereafter being described by him, by Lord Brahma himself. Brahma Samhita that we sing every day in the temples and some verses and otherwise. So they're all the songs of the. So I would say that Lord Brahma is the first living being, if that is the question. Now, who lighted the lamp to Lord Krishna first? I don't know. When Lord Chaitanya was here on the planet, at that point in time, we see that how Lord Chaitanya was being worshipped at the time when Lord Chaitanya was there himself in the form of his deities. So I would say that when Lord Krishna must be present, of course, everybody was worshipping him, his devotees, and that must be first time they would have offered lamps also to him. That's my speculation, Mataji. There's no definite answer that I know of from scripture who's the first living being, except that Lord Brahma is the one very first living being who has worshipped Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So there are some comments on the chat. It says, okay, this is Partha Shraddhi Mataji or Prabhu. Is it Partha Sarathi? Or it says Partha Sarathi. Partha Sarathi that we have heard. Hare Krishna Prabhu, it is mentioned that in Skanda Puran, Kartik month is dearest to Lord Krishna. Any reference of the text, Prabhu? Yes, there are references to this, that Lord Krishna's favorite month is Damodar month. I will have to find some references for you. I'll find some references. I don't have a ready reckoner right now in my head, but I'll search and find some. When we meet next, I'll post it in the group. There are plenty of references where Lord Krishna has declared Damodar month as his favorite month.
Is it the Padma Puran, Prabhuji? Padma Puran.
I think, Mataji, there's a story about this month which was very not liked by anybody, and it was called Mala month. There's a beautiful lecture by His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrit Maharaj on this. It was not considered auspicious at all. And then Lord, when he
Purushottam
approached,
month.
that is Purushottam month, is it? Okay.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Right, that's Purushottam month. So for Damodar month, there is Ras Leela that has happened this month. I think there are references. I'll have to find out for you.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, thank you. Because in Bhagavad Gita 10.35, Lord Krishna says he's actually the Markashish month. But somebody actually asked me, like, he did not mention that like it's a dearest to Krishna, but he says that it's me only, like Markashish month is me. So they are asking me, so I thought taking off your advice, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, thank you.
Okay, we'll do some search on this. And we'll come back to you, Prabhuji, on that. Okay. So, Rabhi Mataji, Pranam, on the topic of void, any materialistic normal person hears this Gita for the first time, can it create a massive emptiness or depression due to acknowledgement that life can be this simple too? How to deal with this shock? First step. So, if somebody believes in void, so I heard Srila Prabhupada saying that, actually I heard His Holiness Bhakti Chara Maharaj saying that there exists a void, which is just outside of, within, as you cross the material world, that's where there's a layer of void, and those who are trying to perfect their life by following voidism may perhaps go there, but there's nothing, and that's where not God exists, and that is not God. And the attractiveness of God is so intense, and the attractiveness of devotional service is so intense. If somebody believes in voidism and able to hear about Krishna and get an association of devotees and develop that faith, and then by the mercy of devotees, he will be able to overcome the fear of any kind of depression or any kind of emptiness within, because Krishna consciousness is not about emptying. Krishna consciousness is about transformation of our desires from materialism to spiritualism. So the heart and mind will always be filled by either materialistic thoughts or spiritualist thoughts. So Krishna consciousness is the process where you gradually eliminate and empty the material thoughts and fill it with the spiritual thoughts. The spiritual activities will replace material activities. Spiritual food will replace the material food. Spiritual books will replace the material books. Spiritual songs will replace the material songs. Spiritual chalachitra or screens will replace the material screens. Spiritual friends will replace the materialistic friends. That's all that will happen simultaneously, and therefore all this confusion of voidism will gradually leave. It will go away. Vartamani, that's what was said. Apavarga, apavarga vartamani. So that's what will happen. So how to deal with this shock? Embrace it, love it, adore it, and get complete devotion into this process. And one would feel a solace, because Krishna consciousness is not empty, thoughts. It is something tangible, Therefore, apavarga vartamani, that process will start, and one would lose the concept of voidism altogether. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. So emptying the mind is not the first step towards Krishna. I thought emptying the mind and
So there's beautiful analogy given, Mataji.
I thought that it was the first step, just forget everything, and
okay.
it's too heavy actually. These verses and everything, they're too heavy and deep, to understand for a normal person. So, I thought emptying the mind was the first step.
Okay.
That's what I thought.
So let's talk about it. It's a very nice question, and it is answered. It is answered. So how do you empty the mind? The analogy is given. Let's say there is blue ink in a bottle, and you have to now replace this blue ink with the white milk. Mind is like that. It is almost impossible to empty the mind, to take out everything out of the mind. It is impossible. So Srila Prabhupada has said that how do you, let's say you can't take the milk, the ink, blue ink out of the bottle. What do you do? You start pouring white milk from the top, and you pour so much of white milk, in due course of time, all the ink will flow out, and eventually the bottle will be white, and the gradual change of the color will happen. Similarly, our mind functions like that. We can't eliminate whatever is there in our minds. It's there for billions of years. So what we do, we start filling our mind with Krishna consciousness. Eventually, when we become so Krishna conscious that everything else is gone away, that is the process. The process is not that of nothingness, of voiding, or trying to eliminate or exit things from our mind. Because if we want to do that, we do not have enough means and equipments to do that. But if we just absorb, it's like leaving a tree. How do you, if you're holding on the tree, you can't say that, and you continue to say, oh, this tree is not leaving me, but we are not leaving the tree. Similarly, to leave the tree, you need to have something else which you can go get hold of. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is something we try to catch on or get hold of. When we do that, then gradually all other things will leave us. Therefore, we would not try to artificially force our mind to become empty. Rather, we would force our mind to get engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, from going to the temple, simple activities like cleaning the temple, cooking for the devotees, helping and serve the prasadam, and doing menial services, and of course, doing oral reception and being with the devotees. All these things will increase our faith, offering arti to the Lord, listening to the Bhagavatam. When we do all these activities, gradually in due course of time, our mind will be empty with nonsense and it will be full with complete transcendental knowledge. That is what Krishna is saying. Gradually, it will happen. I hope that answers.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And people who have suffered any untoward incidents, like people who are subject to some abuse, or they have lost somebody, or they are some abuses are going on. How will they have faith towards this Krishna, and and what goes on in their mind, and how to empty their minds, and what will be the first step for them, towards, because this verse also talks about voidism and people taking shelter of intoxication and hallucination, and those are the people who really need this, because they have been so emotionally battered. And how do you convince them that somebody is out there, you can have faith and take the first step. And
so,
Hare Krishna,
Mataji,
thank you.
the practical answer to this is Krishna Prasadam. Give them beautiful, nice Krishna Prasadam and holy names of the Lord. Because somebody is in mode of ignorance, when they're intoxicated, they're mode of ignorance. There's no way they can straight away understand Krishna. So we give them parts of Krishna's, which they can feel without putting the intelligence to it. When we feed them with Krishna Prasadam, it creates in their heart some sort of sukruti, that they can start to understand what Krishna is trying to say to them through devotees. And that's a very practical thing that Srila Prabhupada had done. All these hippies, they were completely intoxicated, and Srila Prabhupada used to make these corn bullets, which was gulab jamuns. He'll feed them, and he'll feed them prasadam that he would make by his own hands and serve to Krishna and then offer it to everybody. And that process really purified a lot of devotees, and a lot of devotees became devotees of that reason. So people who are out there may not be in a frame of intelligence, then they can take the philosophy, but they can definitely give reception to Krishna Prasadam as well as to the holy names of the Lord in the form of any music. And when they do that, gradually they will be elevated. We used to go to do this service of serving Prasadam to the homeless, and we would see many people who were drunk, they were homeless, but we were serving this nice Prasadam because on the order of Srila Prabhupada, everybody around the temple, 8 to 10 miles, they shouldn't be hungry. And we used to take deliberately this Prasadam to the devotee, to these people, and that's the best way. And then I could see some of these will follow to the temple and eventually become devotees. And that's the only way, because if you want to create an atmosphere where you can forget about material miseries by material arrangements, it is not possible, because matter cannot resolve material problems. Only spiritual solutions can resolve material problems. And that, if not understood by someone, we understand when we give this solution to them, without them knowing, they would be able to overcome their problems. And it's very magical and very mystical process.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate. Thank you, Pranam. Thank you.
On the topic of void, okay, any materialistic normal person hear this Gita for the sub time can create a massive emptiness. I think we have addressed that. Then there's a question, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Okay, there's a comment by Sipra Mataji. Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for wonderful class. Okay, thank you very much for your encouragement. I don't see any other question here, and it's already 9:03, so please forgive me for going beyond 9 o'clock, and we should close this session here. Vanchakalptarubhyascha kripa sindhubhayeva patitanam pavnebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you for such a
Leela
lovely
Purushottam
class.
Prabhu,
Hare
jai
Bol.
Bol.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much for the class. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.